Dr. Buekens is going to be speaking on authorship and publication issues. And it's not often that we have a dean as our instructor, so please ask questions and participate in the conversation.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's good to have a chance to work with you and also with our colleagues from Argentina. So buenas tardes, Buenos Aires. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you're there. All right, excellent. It's good to have this group together.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to talk about publications this afternoon. And when you prepare a manuscript, we're supposed to pick the journal first. But in general, if you have to decide which style you're going to use for the references mostly, what is the most generally accepted style for the references and the preparation of the manuscript? That think about a city somewhere in Canada. Vancouver. So if you think publication, you think Vancouver, right? But why Vancouver?
It's most commonly accepted. The reason I don't know. Widely accepted, I mean.
Okay, so it's a widely accepted style for the references. Mm-hmm. Okay, so how do you find a Vancouver style? Well, you Google Vancouver style or publication, something like that, and you will find a website where you can find the information, right?
Right.
Okay, so publication, Vancouver. Vancouver, you look for the Vancouver style. If you do that, you will actually not end up in Vancouver. You're going to end up at a site which is the site of the International Committee of Medical Journals Editors, and the website is icmje.org. That's why I always have to Google Vancouver first, because I cannot remember, the website. But if you remember Vancouver and the Vancouver style, you will go to their website.
Why is it called Vancouver? Why is it called Vancouver?
Oh, because the original meeting of that group was in Vancouver in 1978. It's a group of editors from the most prestigious medical journals. They came together and decided it would be good to have an agreement. So when manuscript would be rejected by one and sent to another, the authors, you wouldn't have to redo everything. And because it was a group of such powerful journals, it became, for medical sciences certainly, the style, not the only one, but the style used with some variation by most journals. And that group is still alive, evolved, still a group of very distinguished journal editors. And if you go to their website, you will find a link to the Vancouver style, but you will find other things, including at the very top of the site a document which is recommendations for the conduct, reporting, editing, and publication of scholarly work in medical journals. So the reason I'm telling you all that is because if you want to know the rules from an ethics point of view, what is ethical and not in publications, by thinking Vancouver and going to that website, you will find the best recommendations in terms of what you should do and you should not do. So when you have to locate this quickly, think that way. I don't know of any other way to remember where this document is, except when you're in trouble, then you find it, but you don't want to be in trouble, okay? So please do that. Now, among the many things that this document addresses, there are 4 key points. It addresses the issue of who should be the author of a publication, how you should acknowledge the contributors or not authors, the issues of conflict of interest, and the issue of overlapping publications. Okay, and it's all in there. So, and it evolves. I mean, I had to change my slides because this is a 2014 edition, and they made some deletion and some additions. So you have to go back to this document to know what's okay and what's not okay. Now, how do you pick in your own practice? I mean, how do you pick who's going to be the first author of one of your papers? How do you decide that?
The person who write it.
Person who write it, yeah, that's certainly one of the. But so somebody could write it without having participated in the research and be first author?
No, yes, participated either in design or in the experiments.
Okay. What about the last author? Who is often the last author?
Corresponding PI usually last author.
The PI or the PI you said?
Yeah.
The PI could be yeah.
Or corresponding author.
That's a little bit different. Now the corresponding author is the one, if the first author is not the corresponding author for some reason because he or she is moving around too much, that would be another person. But so who will be the last author in most of your publications? The PI, if the PI is junior or senior? Or senior PI would want to be the last. So what about first authors? I mean, because it depends on, I don't know who is in basic science. Who is in basic sciences here? You can self-define yourself, huh? Okay. So do you have only one first author or do you have joined first authors? What do you do? Only one first author? I mean, some journals accept, joint co-authorship, And
People contributed with the first author, like event, first author.
Okay.
They put sometimes like asterisk, like having equal contribution.
Yeah, equal contribution, exactly. Well, not all journals accept that, but some do. Okay. So if you go to the rules, you're correct. I mean, you're all correct in what you said, actually. To be an author, you need to have made a substantial contribution to the conception and design, acquisition of data, or analysis, analysis and interpretation of data. So it could be, especially in epidemiology, that you can be an author if you played a significant role in the analysis. Okay? And actually the wording was changed to be very clear that it was and since the last version. The last version was saying you have to fulfill all the conditions, but it was not clear enough. So they said and, in caps, drafting the article or revising it critically for important intellectual content. And you have to approve the final version to be published. And that's a new one, which is from this 2014 revision. You have to agree to be accountable for all aspects of the work. So you're responsible if you're author. Okay? People are often very nice to me by offering me to be author when I was involved in something in any way, and it's nice of them. I very often decline. I very often decline because I don't, even if I was involved in some aspects of it, maybe I organized the first meeting to make the connection between the two researchers, right? Or, maybe I participate in the conception and the design. Maybe I reviewed the grant application internally before it was submitted. So don't get me wrong, I don't think people invite me to be co-author when I did nothing, although that happens too, and that's more complicated. But I don't feel that I really fulfill all that. Or I don't know enough about what was really done. I trust the author, but I couldn't really, it's too far away from my field, so I decline, to be author. And it happens increasingly because of all these restrictions. Is this easy to really do this?
I would think it's hard for all of the authors to be accountable for all of the work. I mean, I think you really have to consider whether you really can be an author on the paper. You have to be accountable for all aspects.
It's dangerous, huh?
Yes.
I know. You have to be careful. If there is a scientific misconduct, you're there. You cannot say I didn't know. So you don't have to be paranoid about that. Doesn't mean you have to know everything about all the experiments. But at least you have to trust and be part of a group and know they work well and be really involved, be really involved, What about this final approval of the version to be published? It's simple, right? Simple. No? Is that difficult? All the authors, have to give the final approval, or they have to approve the final version.
Seems fair.
Seems fair, but do you think it's always done?
Probably not.
That means when after all, you're circling with the manuscript 15 times, before submitting, you have to send it a last time to everybody. And I would do this by email, so you have some documentation of that. And normally they have to say, yes, I approve this final version. Well, it often doesn't happen because because if it's an electronic submission and your email is, very often the system will send a message to all the co-authors. And it happens to me on a regular basis that I see an email from a journal saying that I submitted a paper this morning, and I don't remember having seen this matter. Yeah, I know who that is, although in 3 cases I didn't know who that was, and until I digged in and there was a relationship, and then I wanted this to be retracted. In one case it became complicated. It was more a policy paper trying to say something strongly positive about the health system of a certain country. And that was a little bit more borderline, so I had to have it retracted. It's very complicated until you do that. But so normally you see it, and it happened to me, maybe it happened to you too, that, you see an email saying this was submitted, and you don't remember having really approved the final version. And it's important because there could be changes, right? Maybe just me, or I don't know. Maybe we could have a comment from Argentina. I think we can hear you. Do you think it's always the case? I'm not talking about you, but in general, that all these steps, if you can see the slides, are fulfilled?
Not always.
Hello? Might not be connected the right way. That's okay. So yeah, you have to go through all that. So any comment from Argentina about this? Is this really easy to do? Maybe not. I was trying to include them. I'm not sure the connection works well. So what this means is that first, if you want to avoid confusion, and that's not only an ethical problem, it's also a logistical problem and a general problem, you have to try to determine the authorship as early as possible. Be very clear about who's going to be author. Very often, when we write a protocol, we have a section on publications in which maybe there is a written comment coming, no? No, I don't know. Yeah. So we often have a section in the protocol about the publication policy. And Mabel and I, we are involved in large trials with our colleagues in Argentina, and we have a publication subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of the steering committee. And there is a chair of this publication subcommittee, and they decide ahead of time for the main paper what the authorship will be. And they also go through a clearance process for all the publications and all the submissions. So if you work on a smaller scale, it's still very central, if you want to avoid conflicts, to decide very early when you write the protocol who's going to be first author, last author, and author at all of the main paper. Does this ring any bell? Did you have any, without citing anybody, did you observe any cases of tension at the last minute when the paper has to be written? And no, never. Okay. Okay, good. I believe you. Often, yeah. Often, of course, yes. Why? Because you need to be promoted, right? And it's in part linked on your publication track record, and what is central depends on the culture. But in most cases, in our field, what is central is being first author. That means you have done the job. Or sometimes if you're in a lab where the culture is that you would have, somebody who did the experiment be first author, where you can explain that. But all that has to be codified and decided early. If not, it's room for conflict. And you want to avoid that because it is important intellectually and for your promotion. Really, it is. So no honorary authorship is possible anymore. It was in the past completely normal and accepted that the director of the lab, whatever he or she would have been done, would be the last author of all the papers. Okay? That's forbidden, and when you see somebody who has 2,000 publications, you have to question that, It can normally not be humanly possible, to have, I would say, more than 1,000. Now, I'm not giving a number here, but more than 1,000 publications PubMed, You have people extremely active and old, and they publish more than 500 papers and are really active, in the lab, and it's legitimate. But after 1,000, when I was training in Belgium, a guy who was really brilliant, had 3,000 publications in PubMed, but he just was a dictator and forcing everybody to put his name as last author on all the papers. And he would read the manuscript and terrify everybody in the lab about it. It's not that he was doing nothing, but it's not healthy, and it's prohibited now if you follow these recommendations. So that's can be a problem because it might not be the culture everywhere. So it could be a problem. The authorship also, it might depend, the importance of the order of the authors might depend on where you are, so you have to take that into consideration. For example, do we have anybody from Mexico here? No? So, well, in Mexico, at least last year, I don't know if that changed, but what is really important for some promotions, including support at the federal level, is to have a manuscript or publication which would count. And it would only count if you are among the 4 first authors. Okay? So myself, I'm often at the end because I'm an old guy. But if for some reason, I would normally be second author because I really played a key role, it doesn't matter to me. So I would often wave, to the other Mexican colleagues because I know it's important for them to be in the top 4, which has no meaning here. So, but for the honorary authorship, it's more complicated because in some places, including in the US or in Europe, it might still be usual to give authorship to the director of the lab, of the department. And it has to be negotiated. But you have documents, and increasingly, when you publish the paper, you have to list at the end the contribution of everybody, right? For real. People don't pay too much attention to that. I mean, they feel whatever, but they shouldn't, because it's really important. And if there's a problem, we'll come back and haunt you. Huh? So, you never were faced with the issue of honorary authorship? No? You didn't know it existed? Come on. Yeah? Claudia? Huh?
In my country, it's common that honorary, even when you are young or young research, not the PI, the director, even the dean.
Oh, no, not the dean.
Sometimes
yeah.
obscure that.
That's a good idea, actually.
Yeah, sometimes, but the same, no? Because need to have promotion or to recognize the school, for example, or small universities.
Yeah. So you just have to negotiate that. I mean, it's not that it's wrong. It's just that it was okay and it's not okay anymore. So
I'm not sure if it's still possible to negotiate that. Sometimes the people are assuming that you must go in your publication or you never receive the money, you know, for the
yeah, that's I've seen that.
In that case, who is the responsible? Can I go to some authority to negotiate that, or you know?
The authority is the editor in this case. So when you submit your paper, if it's to a good journal, you will need to list the contribution of everybody. But if you're forced to, then you have to go to your academic authorities, maybe I mean, IRB would typically not, I don't know, if maybe it's an issue. I mean, I would ask your ethics committee if the ethics committee approved the study. If you have human subjects. Now, if you don't have human subjects, then you don't have that. But it would be with human subject, I think it you know, so if it's part of the protocol, you know, like Mabel, for the studies we do, we have a section in the protocol. Then it's becoming a protocol violation, and you have IRB, and you would go to IRB. That's why we put this there. Somebody's pushing us too much, it's a protocol violation, which has to be reported. But for non-animal, non-human subjects, it would be your academic authorities. But yeah, I know you have to pick your fights also. I'm realistic, you know, but sometimes some behaviors are really not ethical. I had to stand up for a student in a different country because her thesis advisor or director, and it was a joint venture with us, wanted to publish the results without involving her. Actually, he did submit a manuscript without involving her, and adding a lot of co-authors who had nothing to do. So that then sometimes you have to protect your doctoral students against their thesis advisor or director. It happens. So now, what is also forbidden is ghost authorship. We have a policy against that at Tulane, but it's also generally forbidden. What is that? It's a ghost writing for you. New Orleans, you know. When it's foggy, early morning, you see ghost authors, you know. Often because they drank too much the night before. So, what do you do with them? You're approached by a ghost. What do you do? What is that?
It's like when you get somebody else to write the paper for you and you don't give them credit.
And who would that be?
Usually someone junior to your position, so they could be a med student, a postdoc, or rather, just depending on where you are, somebody that you have influence over, or somebody that you pay.
Somebody you pay, and who would pay to write papers in your name?
The device company in my business.
The device company?
The company will actually have somebody write the paper, and then somebody signs off on it. They use academic credentials.
Exactly.
That's the most common.
Exactly. Pharmaceutical companies, device companies, exactly. They do that all the time. You know, they write the paper for you. You know. So that's important. I mean, you might be approached by some of them, and then you would put your name, and the person who wrote the paper was like a professional writer. Okay, doesn't appear anywhere, and your name is there, and you didn't write it. You often, and so that's not only against common sense, against the rule, but it's against Tulane rules also. Okay, so we have a specific ban on that. it happens, busy clinician, okay? Very prestigious surgeon, for example. I don't know, I'm just making this up. Would be approached by a company they work with and say, we're going to write, this about the device you're using with us and your experience, but you have so busy. I'm going to write it for you. So that's really forbidden. No ghost authorship. No, that doesn't mean that you cannot get some support to write your paper. As you can tell, I barely speak English, and I need to have a native speaker editing all my manuscripts, and certainly all my messages to faculty, staff, and students. So it's okay. It's okay to have modest writing support. I write it in English, circulate it to the co-author, and then the last one is going to an assistant who is native speaker and would do an addition, and then I would go back and maybe I will accept some of the suggestions and reject others to make sure there is no change. That's okay, but you should acknowledge that person in your acknowledgement as a protection against ghostwriting.
He cannot be a co-author, right?
I know, because except if he or she, well, if you have a native speaker who is one of your co-author and wants to take the time to do that, because going beyond the usual scientific contribution, that's fine. That's perfect. That's an ideal case.
But just editing doesn't make co-authors.
But no, just writing, no, because it doesn't fulfill the four conditions. Absolutely not. No? Of course, when I was in Belgium, I always had, one or two American students, postdocs, and I would certainly ask them to help with my papers, but I would acknowledge that, but they were not co-author because that was not their papers. That was one way to contribute, but you don't have to abuse that also. I was junior at the time, so they were really my friends and colleagues.
You can acknowledge them.
Yeah, we do that often with the team in Argentina. We always have our students going there, and we tell them, our colleagues in Argentina are making us and you a favor by taking you for the summer, for example, because you're not really helping them, they're helping you. So maybe you can help them with a manuscript and they will acknowledge you, and that's a way to compensate a little bit the team for having all these students around. So it's okay. It's okay. It's even recommended. Do not send, if you're not a native speaker, never send a manuscript to any journal without having a native speaker reviewing the manuscript. Especially if you send it from the US, because that really means that you didn't take the time to find somebody who can edit it, I know we don't have an official language, but English is widely spoken here, I'm told. So, although I speak most.
They can hear you in Argentina.
They can?
Yes.
Good. That's a good thing. So I'll be extra careful about what I'm saying now. No, the acknowledgement is actually a good thing. You should have everybody there having a contribution, not justifying authorship. Okay? Clinical investigators, the one collecting data, the ones providing care for the patients, the ones who helped maybe in facilitating the study, the ones who help in writing the study. You should acknowledge them, but it's more complicated than it seems, because you must get written permission from everybody you're acknowledging. So it's really complicated when it's a very large multicentric randomized trial. But to get all the clinicians involved and so on to sign this form electronically or not, it's a nightmare. So at the end of the day, you kind of balance a little bit, your willingness to be inclusive and the practicality of getting all these approvals. But you need to get them at least an email. Normally, the journals will not ask you to document that, right? But they're assuming that you have some documentation. So what I do is that I collect emails saying it's okay. But it is complicated, and many people don't do it. But it's in the rules, and it's important, because it happened to me also that I was acknowledged in a paper I disagreed with. I didn't disagree, it was not scientific misconduct or anything, but I didn't like their interpretation and the tone, and it was a meta-analysis, it was not. But so, and the data were not wrong, but I disagreed with the conclusion. And they put me in the acknowledgements without showing me the manuscript, because I never saw the manuscript. One day I wanted to write something to criticize that paper, and I realized that I was there. So it's kind of, so I said, who is in the acknowledgement? Who contributed? Why, me? So then I contacted them. They said, oops, and then I thought, well, it's not worth, a fight. But it's a problem, because it was endorsing a certain view of the literature which I disagree with, and so being in the acknowledgement is not neutral. Even though you don't endorse everything, you cannot give your blessing to some extent. So you need to get this acknowledgement, really. Is this? I'm not asking about your own papers, okay? It's about a friend, your best friend, somebody you know, okay? Not about you, okay? So, do you know somebody, who maybe submit a paper without getting written acknowledgement? I do.
We need to do for Lancet, ask all the writing permission for all the field staff for SB trial in Argentina.
And it was a huge task. We published a Lancet together last year. There were, I think, how many people in the acknowledgement? Hundreds. Yeah, it was hundreds. It was a nightmare. Yeah. But it was the Lancet. So people move because they even to be in the acknowledgement, they generally move. But if it's for a more obscure journal, they never do it. Never do it. Yeah. But you did it.
Yeah. When I sent the paper to the collaborators in announcement, they say, okay, try or say something, comment, suggestions, but never send and write.
Oh, you don't need to.
Or just need to have an email.
Yeah, an email. Yeah, written permission is that.
It's not official like a
no.
letter.
No. It's just for you. Except, with some journals, they will want real documentation. So it depends. But if the journal is not requesting that, that's just for you. Just for you. So in the acknowledgement, they saw the manuscript, the final version though,
yeah.
and the names is there, and they say it's okay, but better you explicitly tell them you are in the acknowledgement. Do you agree? So, and it has to be like for the exit rows in the airplanes. It has to be a real yes. Okay. So nobody had this problem before? Nobody had this problem before, just me. No? Nobody had this problem before.
Put somebody in my paper and I didn't ask for the written permission in the acknowledgement.
That's okay, I'll forgive you.
I didn't know that we must have this permission, written permission. I know she was okay, but orally, we discussed orally, not with the written permission.
Yeah, you see.
Or like if somebody is working with you, like a colleague, or you want to acknowledge, you just tell that we are putting your name in the acknowledgement.
In an email, yeah.
Or email.
In an email, you have to have a written permission.
Not just oral.
No, not all the journals follow the rules of the Vancouver team, and if the journal didn't ask for this explicitly and they do not follow the rules, it's still a bit up to you. But what I'm trying to say is that this is the best practice. So I just would suggest, it doesn't mean that you did something wrong, but to be safe, and also if you think about it, even though it's a pain, it is safer, Would you like to be involved in acknowledged in a paper? Maybe you didn't agree exactly with the way it was done. So it's just good practice, that. On the conflict of interest side, I think it's okay now, because I mean, first, if you're at Tulane, you all have to complete your COI every year, so your conflict of interest form. So you already know what you have to disclose or not. You thought about it, and then when you submit to the journal, you almost always now have to complete a conflict of interest form. So there is, I think, no way you will really forget that, and it's about your own conflict of interest. I mean, I was paid by a company which could benefit from this publication, or maybe the funding came from an entity which could benefit from the publication, and you're going to disclose that. So there was a radical change during the last 10 years about conflict of interest, and it's to the extent that I really avoid anything now with pharmaceutical companies, because it's so much paperwork for me. So I don't go to any dinner. I don't accept any sponsoring. I do work with non-federal entities. It could be an NGO, it could be a consulting firm, but I would always declare them, and I will think twice. I mean, is this creating a conflict or not? And even if it's not, if it is, I don't do it. But even if it's not, I mean, is this worth the paperwork, and how will this be perceived? Because every time I do that, I mean, if they're constantly inviting me to, there's a medical association here, they invite me to these dinners sponsored by a pharmaceutical company. I can never go. I have to go back to my COI, remember the website, try to see where I need to put this information from A, B, C, D, submitted, is going to the provost, and to be approved. I don't go to dinner, I don't do it. So I have decreased all my involvement because it's such a headache. And then for publications, if I accept something with a company, we work on corticosteroids, and we work on congenital syphilis and so on. If I accept something from a company, I have to make sure that company doesn't have any conflict, because then I have to disclose it when I publish, and it could be misperceived. So I just stay away from it now. It's a little bit excessive, perhaps, but it has been a radical change. Not so in the past. I mean, they would invite us to all sorts of events and stuff, and travel. I mean, I never accept any. First, I try to travel less and not more. Second, I never accept any travel money for any company for the last 15 years, because it's a headache. Or if you're in the same situation. Doesn't mean you cannot do it, but you have to do the paperwork. And make sure it's not boxing you in terms of your research. Then another issue is the issue of overlapping publications. What is an overlapping publication? One way to define this, I don't think it's here, but what you see relatively often is if there is more than 10% overlap. Overlap, I mean overlap in science, not in wording. In wording, there should be no overlap. That's auto-plagiarism, you cannot do that. You cannot use your own language from your own publications to do another publication, right? Even if you are the author, you cannot cut and paste from another manuscript. It's plagiarism against yourself. You cannot do that. And because this other manuscript was published and there is a copyright there. And even if you're the author, you don't own the copyright, so you cannot do that. But also, if there is more than 10% overlap, then the question is, are you trying to use the LPU approach, the least publishable units approach, where you cut things in little slices to multiply your papers? It's okay to do this to some extent, because you want to put everything in one paper, because the message could be lost.
Sometimes there are people, some journals have like a page limit.
There's a page limit. There is the brain limit of what you can read, right? But that's different from really saying, that's a variation. I could put this in the text in the line, but I'm not going to publish. You should not go too far.
You can do it, but I'm just asking in case there is too much like a material for the same project, you know?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I do that all the time, but not on purpose to do two publications from one where you could explain it elegantly in one. You know, that's, as a scientist, you have to try to condense, you know, not to split, you know. And then what is really forbidden is dual submissions. Don't even think about it, and people do it. They send the same manuscript to 2 or 3 journals at the same time because they're in a hurry to be promoted or for their CV, for their grants. And they say, well, you know, one will take it. You know? And that's against all rules. It's of bad taste. And it's also pretty short-sighted because it's very likely that the same reviewer will receive the same manuscript. That happened to me also. Well, stuff happened to me and nothing happened to you. Well, it happened to me. Got the same manuscript twice, almost at the same time from 2 different journals. So I called the editor on both sides and saying, that person is doing a dual submission. That's really bad. So don't even think about doing that. But people do that. People do that. They don't think it's going to, I mean, they work in a field which is that narrow. There are only 5 experts, and they don't think that how do the editors pick the reviewers? How do they do that? Well, they have their database with the people, I mean, the member of the editorial boards and the ones who have reviewed before. Okay, but that's often too broad. What do they do? The first thing an editor does, looking at your references. You know, do I know somebody who is in these references? You know, I do that all the time. You know, for the journals I'm a member of the editorial board of. You know, I don't know this topic, but now, you know, Claudia or Mabel published on this. So anonymously, I will pick them because I know, you know, I know them and know I see. So if you send the same manuscript with the same references, which are selected, chances are the editor, how he or she will pick a reviewer who is really in your field because he or she knows that person before, or they will find that person through your references. So it's very likely they're going to send it to the same people. So
I just have a question about that. So I can understand why dual submission, like I understand why that's, you know, stupid and bad to do, but why is it so emphatically bad, out of curiosity?
Because you're making the life of the editors miserable. And that's the worst thing you can do.
Fair enough.
And because technically, if it could happen that they would both accept it, you know, and there could be a dual publication, except if you stop it, and that would become a problem. Right. So, and if you stop it, then it's morally, ethically, economically, personally not nice, because the editor had to go through an entire review. The reviewers had to review it, and then you will say, "I'm sorry, you know, don't go to the international journal because I go to the global journal. It's slightly better in impact factor." That's one. But I agree with you. It's not obvious. That's why people do this. I'm not saying that they do something wrong. I mean, none of the behavior I described is because people have bad intentions. It's just not completely clear and obvious. You have to think about it. You have to think about the way editors work. So it's not obvious. So it's a good question.
So most of the journals in the submission process, usually they ask if you have submitted to any other journal. So
yeah,
they're not gonna, you know, let you submit.
No. Yeah. They do ask. That's true. Yes, you have to write a letter, cover it off. You did not. Yeah. No. True. Now, this is, I think, my last slide. Moving a bit away from pure ethics, remember also that public access is absolutely central now if you receive any kind of federal funding, right? Or soon to be Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funding, you have to provide public access to your manuscript. because you need your PMCID number. It is the number giving access to the full text, open access. If you want to count that publication in other NIH submissions, for example, because you need to or publish in a journal which is automatically making the full text open access, or because it's an open access journal, or because they have this policy that if you are federally funded, they will provide open access. There is often a box you can tick saying, I have federal funding. They will do it for you. But many journals will not. So what do you do when the journal will not do it for you? What's the process?
Mostly, if it is funded by NIH, then you can write to the journal, that this was funded by NIH and did the policy of NIH to be open access.
Yeah, you can try that, but if the journal has a policy that's generally already very clearly stated, if they are not, they will say, oh, you can make it open access, pay $5,000, So what is NIH saying? NIH is saying that if the journal doesn't want to do it for free, you need to upload the final version of the manuscript, because you cannot upload the PDF from the journal. You violate the copyright from the journal, So you have to upload the final version of your manuscript, which you always have to save, by the way, for that reason, among others. And you have to do a PDF yourself of that Word document. It has to be similar to the final, but cannot be the one published by the journal. And you have to upload that, And, it's one rule against the other. The federal government tells you have to do it, okay? And then you will go through a vetting process until you got your PMCID number. It's only then also that you can link it to one of your grants. At the beginning, when it started in 2008, it was progressing and not enforced. Now it's increasingly enforced. Your grant can be rejected because you are citing papers we are not open access. You don't have a PMCID number in the papers after 2008 funded by the federal government. But also, if it's electronic submission, increasingly you cannot escape, because you must electronically link your papers to your grants by going through e-commons. Okay, and if you try to link, if you want to, we try to renew our T32 now, so I'm working on that. If one of my PhD students published something and he or she acknowledged the T32 in the acknowledgement, you have to acknowledge your source of funding, I need to count that paper in my resubmission, right, to show that my students are active. But to do that, you have to do it electronically. So you have to go to e-commons, and I can see a list of all my grants, okay, and a list of publication in PubMed. So I click on publication in PubMed, I link it to the T32. The moment I do that, paf, it will say PMCID number. This is not open access. And if you don't generate the PMCID number, it cannot be linked and you lose it. So what I'm trying to say is that it was a nice intention at the beginning, not too much enforced. No, you have to do it. And PMC number are different from PMCID number. PMC number is the PubMed number for any publication. But the PMCID, that's the number for open access. So many people mix the two and they put a PMC, but that's not valid. So you really have to do it, and we spend a lot of time trying to do that. So that's not that's a federal rule, okay? Gates say that they will also enforce it now, but they will pay for the open access, different approach. So the federal government says, ignore the private companies, it's our ownership. Upload the Word version transformed in PDF, and we don't care if the journal is losing money on that. And Gates is saying we want open access, but we're respectful the private enterprise, so take money from your grant to systematically buy the open access, but you have to do it. or at least that's what they announced. So this is not really ethics, it's more general. So our colleagues in Argentina, they can listen, but they cannot...
They can respond.
Can respond?
To speak up.
Okay. Any comment from Argentina? I'm told that if you unmute and if you speak up, I will be able to hear you. No, not really. Any comment from the floor here? Any other comment? Yes, hello? Yes?
The last point that you made about uploading a manuscript, what do you upload to?
You have there are several ways to do it, but look at the website there, publicaccess.nih.gov, okay? And you upload to PubMed, basically. So when you get your PMC ID number, the manuscript you uploaded is open access, visible on PubMed. So,
what does the term corresponding author mean?
The ones who will receive the correspondence from the editor, in the past, the main envelope, the main email, and the one who will, really be the corresponding person with the editor. Somebody who has a stable email, a stable phone, and a stable address, and knows enough about the manuscript is almost always the first author. But if somebody is moving to another postdoc position, and it might be safer, to have somebody who is maybe the last author, for example, who will just be the contact person. Because if you lose remember when you get your proofs, you have maximum 72 hours, often 24 hours, right, to correct the proofs. Mm-hmm. So the corresponding author needs to be not only somebody having a stable email, but somebody who reads his or her email and is alert and will jump on the proofs, So very important. Because if not, it's gone. So it happened to me. So, but not to you, I know. Yeah.
One more question about authorship. Do you know of any credible sort of movements to do away with the sort of hierarchical authorship system that's in place?
Movement? I don't know. I mean, there's of course discussions about that. In academia, it's maybe the opposite. I think it's increasingly important. So, do you know of such a movement? I mean, it would. I could see the argument. On the other hand, we live in a PI-oriented system, where somebody has to take the lead and write the grant, and then coordinate and write the paper. So, what is very clear for me is that the first author has to write the paper. That's already, and that's really a lot of work, as you know, per se. So if we'll have equal authorship, fine, but who will write the paper, for example? You can have a system, but it's not that easy. In a better world, I could tell you that for promotions, it's not always the first. It depends on the culture, as I said, but your leading author. Because it's important because we want to see independence, and we want to see collaborations, right? It's great to want to see you on papers with multiple authors, and not being the first all the time, because that's also not good. If you're always the first author, that means you don't collaborate well. You need to have a good balance there. Often 50-50 or something like that. That shows that you're really independent and doing the work, but you also collaborate, and you can, nicely, let somebody else be first author when needed. You don't control. Especially then if you're becoming senior, it's really of bad taste to be first author too often. That really shows that you're not playing the game well. You're not helping the team. Really not. That's really, no. Any other question or comment? Well, I hope all this will never happen to you then. All right, we're more or less on time, no? We're more or less on time.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Excellent. Excellent.
I just emailed Glenn. There's no slides there or something.
Well, I don't know. You can check if we